Hello everyone, Throttle-On John here. We're changing the oil on the Yamaha AR220 jet boat. It has two inline triple engines and it's much like a jet ski. There's a few videos out there on that, but I wanted to do one for this boat in particular. So if you're interested in how to do that, tune in. It's relatively simple. Let's do it. Okay, so what are you going to need? You're going to need some, marine oil, the one that's spec'd for your boat. In this case, it's a SAE 1030 weight oil. I've used Yamaha lube or another oil that's spec'd out for this machine. The other thing is you'll want some paper towels, shop towels. I just got those at Costco. You'll want your appropriate Yamaha filters. You'll need two since there's two engines. You'll need something to remove that filter. I'm using the Tusk 65 millimeter oil filter socket. It fits on the OEM filters perfect, and you could get that on Rocky Mountain ATV or other place of your liking, or an auto parts store if you could find the right size. A 65 millimeter, it would be fine. I use a hammer and a small awl or punch to get a hole in the end of the oil filter so that it drains more out into the engine instead of puking all over the motor. You'll need a ratchet for your oil filter removal tool, and then you'll need an oil extractor. I got this from Jet Boat Pilot, but you can get something like this in many places, but this one works well. And then I like to put two towels down. These towels I'm going to put down in the where in front of the engine bay while I'm working, so that if I happen to spill, I'm really careful, but if I happen to spill, then it would go on the towels and not on the fabric of the boat, because most of us boat owners, we like to keep things just so, removing shoes before people board the boat and those kinds of things. So, when we're working on the boat, we want to be careful. So let's go ahead, let's get to it. It's pretty easy. The biggest thing that's different for me with other things that I've worked on, motorcycles, cars, other things, is you have to extract the oil out with this oil extractor. There's no drain, so you've got to pump it out. And the first time, I've owned this boat 2 years. This is a 23. And I've waited through a few oil changes because I wanted to get it down before I did a video. And the first one, I didn't suck all the oil out. And there's two baffles in the oil tank where you extract the oil out. And the first oil change, I didn't get it all out, and there's a little trick. You have to just drop it down. There's two levels, and you have to drop it down to the second level with the straw or the suction tube to make sure you're getting deep enough. And I'll point that out when I get to that part of the video. So let's go ahead and get started. I forgot to mention, I also like to use a kneeling mat. There's a lot of kneeling. This whole process will be done kneeling over the engine bay, so this will just help spare your knees. So I'll put that on top of the towels. But that's optional. You can get this. You could use a gardening one. You could use one from an automotive store, which is where I got this from, but they'll really help your knees out. So here we are. We're kind of at the back of the boat. Walking towards the back of the boat. You've got these two latches here. I have my towels down and a kneeling pad down, so I got these two latches. I'm just going to release each one. Just lift up, and then you'll see we'll expose both motors. So one inline triple over here and one inline triple over here. And we just need to suck the oil out where that yellow dipstick is, and also where this hose is. I've went ahead and marked it with a orange dot, just so when I change oil, it's usually like a yearly thing, I don't get confused. It's not this one, it's this one back here, and I just demarcated it with an orange dot, and I also marked it over there with an orange dot. You could do something similar. Oh, so we need pliers too to remove this, so I better go grab those. But before we get started, I'm going to knock with an awl a little hole in this top of this oil filter and on the other oil filter, so the oil it'll release the vacuum, so that will drain out of there while we're taking these other steps to suck the oil out of the motor. So let's go ahead and do that now. So now I'm going to take my awl, put it on top of this filter, punch it in the center, and just lightly tap a hole in the center of that oil filter. You could also use a screw, like a sheet metal screw, but don't drill it. You wouldn't want to introduce metal particles into the oil filter. Pretty easy to do. You just tap this, and that went right in there. Of course, I'm doing that one-handed, and I did get it started with two hands, and I just put a little hole so that releases the vacuum so the oil can drain into the motor. And I really need to do a review of this boat. It has been flawless. It has been great. And my family, we've had a ball. We've foiled behind it, wakeboard, water skied, tubed. We've done it all, and it's just been fabulous. Anyway, so now let's go ahead and do the same thing on this other oil filter over here. Just punch a hole in the middle of that oil filter. These motors have worked great, but they're very complicated. I mean, it's a 3-cylinder motor over here, or 3-cylinder motor over here. You know, you have dual overhead cam, multiple valves per cylinder, and so you want to keep all that clean and clean engine oil. If you keep it clean, these motors, I think they're pretty bulletproof. I've had one that's similar in a MT-09 motorcycle, and it was bulletproof. As far as if you maintained it, it was nothing ever went wrong. It was always quiet and smooth. So I believe with these motors, if you keep your oil clean, I don't see you ever having trouble. But just like anything, it needs maintenance. Any pliers would work for this, but I'm using these kind of Fat Max pliers. They have a nice square end on them, but any pliers would work. These aren't on here hard. And so you're just going to go back here, and there's a front one and a back one. And you can see we're going for this back one. See how it comes off of this plastic one with a plastic fitting and the engine hanger. And so we're just gonna grab that, and you squeeze it, and you're just gonna scoot it down, get it off that nipple there. You can see it runs to about there. Okay, now I'm gonna come over here. Since we have to do, my one complaint was with two motors, you have to do everything twice, which isn't terrible, but it's one of those things. But you know, for once a year I can handle it. And then I move that one down there. And again, you can mark these like I did, but you don't have to. Just kind of idiot proofs it and keep somebody from, like me, messing up. Okay, so now on both sides, we're going to set our pliers down, and we're just going to wiggle this. So with a little twisting back and forth, that comes off. We're going to suck oil out of there, and then back over to this other side. And with a little twisting back and forth, sometimes it doesn't want to break loose, but eventually it does, and then you just pull it off. There we go. And now I will suck the oil out from here, and then once that's empty, then we'll move over here to the dipstick, and this is where there's two levels to catch. I will suck the oil out of there second. And I do one engine at a time, then I can make sure I'm getting all the oil out. Okay, this thing's pretty handy. You put your pump on the top, this little hose on the end, it tapers to a black hose, and then this black hose will go, will feed down into that hose to extract the oil out. So let's go ahead, and we're going to put the hose of the extractor down that breather tube. So here we are putting the extractor tube down the breather tube, and we just feed that down there till it stops. All the way down. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm out of breath, but I have to lean over this boat, and it's engine bay. It's not exactly comfortable, but that's the way it is. So you can see I'm just feeding that down, and there's a point where it just stops, and you stop there. You don't need to jam it in there. And you know, I'll bump against it a few times to make sure I'm there, but when it's there, it's there. And that one will stay in there without me holding it because of the rubber tube. And now it's just a matter of pumping your extractor, and it'll start sucking it up into here, and I'll suck that, keep pumping it until you can see how the oil starts to come up there. And you just pump this thing. They do have some that work off of an air compressor too, but this one's worked fine for me. See, there comes the old oil there. And we're going to do that till we extract as much oil of it out as we can. Then after you build up some pressure, this will keep flowing and you can just let it do its work. The nice part about this is it's segmented, so each segment I believe is roughly a quart. And I'll pump the left engine in this fashion, and then when I do the right one, I'll of course move it over here. And here's my kneeling pad. And we'll just kind of keep pumping and let it flow, and then we'll pump some more. And we'll extract the oil from the breather tube location, and then we'll move to the dipstick location. And be patient. It takes some time. You can see this is filling there, but it just takes a little time. Intermittently, maybe add 10, 20 pumps or so. And they do make electric extractors and some that run off of an air compressor. There's nothing wrong with using those. This is just pretty simple, so I just keep using it. Once a year, it's not bad. While that's going on, many times while that's sucking the fluid out, oil out, many times I'll go back here, and you can use your evacuator and put it along the base of this oil filter and catch things if they drop out, oil if it leaks out. I typically just tuck some towels around the base of the filter and do that, and have had good luck with that really not making much of a mess. But you know, that's the way I do it. So I'm going to loosen up that oil filter now and swap that out while we're waiting for that to continue to for the oil to continue to be evacuated. Okay, now I have my oil wrench on there for the top of that oil filter, and we're just gonna set that on top of there. Make sure it gets on there nice and snug, and it is. And then we're just going to loosen that up. There it goes. And then I'm gonna get ready to catch any oil that might come out. Just gonna tuck that down in there, and I don't really feel any much coming out. I think it's because we poke that hole. Then we're going to loosen that filter off by hand. Going to remove this, and then I'll just spin that off by hand now. Here we are with our oil filter on that the removal oil filter wrench on the top of the oil filter, and then we're just now going to break that loose, going left. Might as well remove that one too. There we go. And now we'll just spin these off by hand. I have these rags here to catch oil. And there's a little bit there. And we'll pull that filter right off. So the oil filter screws off to the left. And I'm going to take a rag, a clean rag, and let it sit down here to catch all the oil around where that came off. And just let it kind of soak that up for a little while. And you could use your evacuator on that very easily. Okay, and we've also we're going to remove this other oil filter in the same way. I do have a little container in here that's clean that I put the oil filter in so it has a place to go and not be messy. Something to be aware of is when you punch the hole in the oil filter, there is this little thing in the oil filter which can come out of the end of it, so make sure if that's down in there, you pull that out. And it just looks like that. If you went just off center on the oil filter, like instead of being, you know, right in the middle, just off to the center, like even just over here, then you wouldn't hit that. But just make sure if you find anything that looks like that, you know, look in your oil filter, it shouldn't be in there. So, you know, sometimes I wonder, even though Yamaha manual recommends it, if punching a hole in the filter just for risk of leaving that in there, you know, is a bad thing. Maybe a point that needs to be made is the boat trailer is unhooked from the vehicle, the tow vehicle, and I left it kind of lifted up a little bit, pretty much a normal height, maybe a little more than normal, and that would tip the oil to the back of the motor where we're sucking it out. But again, I haven't really jacked it up crazy high. It's just, if it were hooked to the vehicle, the tongue of the trailer would be nose down, which would probably make this a little more level. But I wanted to maximize how much oil I could extract. So you can see right now we have about 1, 2, 3 quarts out now. Look at that. 1, 2, yeah. And we get about 3.5 to 3.6 quarts out per motor, so we're probably getting close. You just have to be patient. That's why I like to move on to doing the oil filters while I'm waiting for that first breather hose to extract. I'm still on that breather hose. And then I'll probably put the oil filter on while I'm sucking out from around the yellow dipstick. Or inside where that yellow dipstick is. Right there. That is the sound it'll make when it gets to the bottom. And I'll usually just fish this around a little bit, making sure it's at the bottom. And yeah, nothing else comes even if I push it back down. So when you get that to the bottom, you know that you've emptied out from the breather what's going to come out from that breather location. I'll suck out around the filter for a second. And it looks like we're 1, 2, 3. We got about a little over 3 quarts out there. And you can see the oil's just, this tube is clear and it's kind of empty. So we'll go ahead and pull this out of here and we'll catch out around the filter. You know, I'm really not getting any from around here, so I wiped that out with a cloth. And that's nice and clean, so we're good there. Ready to put our filter back on. Sorry for the jerkiness. So we pulled the oil out from there. We can now put our breather tube back and our oil filter back on. We still need to suck out from that, the oil out from that. And you could do this in any order really at this point. As far as we could suck the oil out from that other location. Maybe I'll do that just to keep it simple. So I'm now going to remove this dipstick, suck oil out from there. I'm going to put my breather tube back. So now we're going to unscrew our dipstick, and I always set this someplace clean, like on a clean, fresh towel, or it's not going to fall. And now we're going to suck out the oil from the dipstick location. And here's where there's kind of a baffle area that you have to make sure you get down deep enough into. So here's my little suction hose here. Now you can see if I put this down in here, if I go towards the edge closest to me here, I hit something. But if I move over, it goes down, ooh, wow, like I'm talking like 4 inches, well, 3 inches further. So here's where I am there. And if I pull it out and move over, look, see how I'm left with like 4 or 5 inches, but then, and I'm hitting. But if I move it to the rear of the boat, trying to find the hole. It takes a little bit. There will be a place where it will drop down further. And now I'm not finding it. Maybe this is good. Oh, there it goes. And see, it went down like 4 more inches. That's where we need to pull that oil out of. And I don't know if you can see it on camera or not. Yeah, it's kind of a hole in there. It's hard to see, but you have to make sure that you're dropped in it. Now we'll suck from there. And the first time I changed the oil on this, I think I only pulled out 2.5, 2.8, maybe 3 quarts out of it, 3 quarts. And the manual says there's a lot more out of it that should come out than that. I'm closer to 3.5 to 4. And so I knew something was wrong. And I was reading online in some forums, and somebody said, you didn't get deep enough in the baffled dipstick area, and they were exactly right. So thank you, whoever you are. So we're just gonna finish sucking the oil out, and while I'm waiting, I'm gonna go ahead and put this back. I might even put a little silicone grease on there so that comes off easier next year before I put that back, but you don't need to do that. And then we'll replace our clamp, and then we're gonna put our oil filter on. So you always want your mating surface clean, no debris. This is a new rag. Just making sure this surface is nice and clean, and it is, it's perfect. Make sure that little plastic doodad didn't fall in anywhere that came off your filter when you punched it. And by the way, they made it big enough to where it can't fall in this, so you don't have to worry about it falling inside of there. It can fall up to it, but it can't drop inside the motor, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now you take your new Yamaha filter, I'm using the 5GH1344080. You can pause it if you want to get that part number. That's a Yamaha OEM filter. We're going to put a bead of oil around this. Normally I'd pre-fill the oil filter, but it's going on like that, and there's just no way I can't do it. So because it's going on the engine like that, the oil would all drain out. So I'm going to put a little bead of new oil around here, and then we're just going to spin this on. And this says to torque the filter to 15 to 20 Newton meters. I typically don't torque oil filters. I usually go like 3/4, half to a 3/4, maybe at the most 1 turn after the O-ring seats. But I'm going to follow the instructions. I'm actually going to get a torque wrench out on this, but I don't think you would have to. But I am going to torque it to the spec that the instructions are telling me to do. So I just dip my finger in my oil and put a nice bead around that gasket, and let's go ahead and screw it on and torque it to spec. So this should just easily spin on. You don't want to cross thread it. You see how it spins on, piece of cake. That just seated down, but I'm going to grab my torque wrench to get that to the spec. It might be a little easier to show the oil filter going on this side, so you can see I'm just kind of coming in here with my lubed gasket. And I lube the threads on the inside of the filter, and that should spin on real easy like that. That's motor number 2. And I just bottomed it out, and now I'm going to get a torque wrench on there too. I don't know that this is necessary on this filter, but I'm just going to torque this to like the minimum, 15 to 17 Newton meters. So I got my torque wrench set to 15, and I'm just going to torque it till it clicks. I put an extension on this filter to clear some of the engine parts for torquing the filter. And you're just going to torque that till, if you're going to decide to do this, till it clicks like that, and that's it. I do think torquing an oil filter is overkill. I typically never do that, but it's on the filter. It's not going to hurt to just do it. And I just torqued the other side too. There it goes. I'm just going to take some Silk-Glide silicone grease. I found if I put it on under this plastic nipple before I put the clamp back on, it just makes it so it pulls off easier next time. But this is optional. You don't have to do this. So now we're going to replace our breather tube where we previously sucked the oil out of, get it all the way back on, and then we're going to replace our clamp. Here we are, sliding this back up. So it's about in the middle of the clamp there, and then release it, and that looks really, really good. And while we were doing that, this finished. We got all the oil sucked out of that. Just a footnote, the capacity of this isn't enough for 2 motors, so make sure you empty your oil evacuator into a recycling container before you empty the second motor. You'll run out of space in your evacuator. And then I like these containers because I can take it to my auto parts store or recycling center, and they'll take that oil for me. This would also be a time if you wanted to take an oil sample, you could. I did this on my first oil change, and it came back good. The oil was getting a little bit of out of viscosity with 40 hours on it. That's the Yamaha lube. So I'm actually going to try AMSOIL this time to see if it holds up its viscosity a little better. And this isn't meant to be a knock on Yamaha lube. I've used Yamaha lube on lots of machines and with great results, but I just want to try something different, and then I'll run an oil analysis on it. But honestly, I'd want to run the AMSOIL since I'm switching oil, do an oil change, and then run AMSOIL again, and then analyze that, because I'll have 2. You don't get every drop of the old oil out, and it's not really till that second oil change that you really know what's going on with an oil. But anyway, I'm just trying something different, that's all. But nothing wrong with using Yamaha lube, especially if you're in the warranty period or what have you. That's always a good idea. Okay, it's time to refill this. This is kind of an important point. The capacity is around 3.5 quarts, give or take a little bit. And if you put it all in where the yellow dipstick is, it will overflow. How do I know that? Well, I did that my first oil change. So you want to put at least half into the valve cover here. removing this, plugging the funnel. You want a funnel to do that so you don't make a mess. And you could actually put a little more than half into the valve cover, but if you put half and half, you're going to be fine. And then you'll put some into the dipstick over there. So let's go ahead and fill it up. I'm going to fill up with 3.5 quarts, and then adjust from there. And how do I know I can put 3.5 quarts in? Because I pulled a little over 3.5 quarts out. So we're going to go with that, and then we can adjust. So here's just a clean regular funnel. I always clean my funnels and put them in a Ziploc baggie when I'm done, because you don't want to introduce debris into the engine. You want it to be very, very clean, like you're doing a surgery. So let's go ahead and put our funnel in there. I'm going to use AMSOIL Marine engine oil. It's to Yamaha spec, SAE 10 weight, 40 weight. And we're just going to put 2.5 quarts into the valve cover, and put the finishing remaining amount into the yellow dipstick. This is just kind of a separate point, but I did do a brake and oil change on these engines at around 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours when the boat was new, and I was so glad I got the oil out. It looked tired. So don't slack on your oil changes. These are Yamaha makes really reliable motors. I think some of the most reliable motors, but if you don't change your engine oil, nothing can overcome oil that's lost its viscosity and is breaking down and full of debris. The filter can catch so much, but just change your oil. It's easy to do. It takes some time. That's the only drawback, is this is slow, sucking the engine oil out. It's just slow. There's nothing hard here that I'm doing. It's just slow. Okay, so here we are getting 2.5 in, still at the valve cover location. And I'm going to put the remaining in through the yellow dipstick location. And of course, be sure to put your valve cover plug back in. And we've now removed our yellow dipstick, and we're going to put oil in through the yellow where the yellow dipstick was. This is just snug. It's got an O-ring, snug, but not crazy tight on the valve cover. And then I always like to inspect my work. Got my hose on, clamp replaced, oil filter on. We're looking good. So let's finish off, topping off the oil. We're now putting oil into the second location. I put 2.5 in roughly through the valve cover location. Now I'm going to put remaining 1.5 in there. Usually while I'm the once a year when I change the oil, I'll go ahead and lube up the there's a Zerk fitting, there's a cap you remove. You can put a Zerk gun on there and pump it with some Yamaha marine grease. And I just have it in this grease gun, and I give it 10 or so pumps, sometimes a little more. That's something you can do. It doesn't pertain to the oil change, but it's good maintenance to do. You can get this on Amazon. I like this lock and lube tip, because you push this trigger and then you release it, and it locks on the Zerk feeding, so it's hard to hold it on back there. So this has been great for that. If you do decide to grease that, just be sure to replace your little rubber cap on the Zerk fitting when you're all done. There's absolutely nothing hard about this entire process. The hardest thing is that, you do one motor. I got the first motor done pretty fast, but now doing this second one, just evacuating the oil just takes some time. So just take your time with it, and you'll be glad you did it. I like doing a job knowing that it's done right. I feel good about that. So I do like doing it myself. I know that I took my time, and I know that it's done right. Another thing you can do while you're waiting for the oil to suck out of the second engine is I'm not going to start these, I'm just putting power to it. And then this will power on, and then we're just going to reset our maintenance information here. So you can go to the top, and there's kind of your trip distance, economy, miles, fuel used, not all that useful information. You go to that one with the little gears, and there it'll show wellness. And on this oil change, I think it's showing 27 hours. So we're not through what it would consider the normal service interval, but we're still going to reset that. So I'm going to write 27 hours in my maintenance log so I know, and know where it's at, and then we just come down here and we hit, reset. It's harder to do than I thought. There you go. And then it's asking you time since last maintenance, reset maintenance schedule, and then I'm just going to hit confirm. And there, it takes it back down to 0 hours. Now you've got your wellness reset. So just a word on the oil capacity. In the manual, it says that the total engine oil capacity is 3.9 US quarts, or 3.7 liters. And then here's the odd thing, is it says without the oil change, it's 3.59 US quarts. With the oil filter replacement, it's 3.38 US quarts. Really, as you can see, I arrowed, those have to be reversed, because when you pull the filter off, it loses more oil. It doesn't take less oil. And when I change oil, I need to get it from anywhere from 3.6 quarts to 4 to get it full on the dipstick. Okay, now let's switch to that. When you're looking at the dipstick, you have you screw the dipstick in to check the oil, the yellow dipstick, and the maximum is, at that full mark, that you don't want it above that, and the minimum is you don't want it below that. Okay. Now the rest of the way you do this is you need to run the engine at idling speed for 6 minutes or more, and then if it's 68 degrees or less, which is common in Oregon, you have to run it an additional 5 minutes. So anyway, that's the ambient air temperature. So long story short, for me to finish off checking the oil, I just wait till I'm in the water. And I usually bring a funnel and some rags and a quart of oil with me. So I have about 3.6 quarts in the engine right now, and then I'll run it when I'm in the water. Otherwise, you need to, hook water up to I'd have to pull the boat outside. It's winter right now. It's cold. It's wet. It's rainy. And then I would, have to start the engine, turn the water on, and let it go through the motor and run that in that fashion for that period of time, which, you could certainly do. It wouldn't be the wrong thing to do. Then you wouldn't have to fiddle with it out on the water, but it isn't a big deal for me to just go out, run the boat around for 5-6 minutes, stop, and I just check my oil level. So the first time or two out. So, but there's the procedure for doing all that. And I hope this video was helpful. The manual, that is odd. It'd be interesting. This is a 2023 manual. It'd be interesting if they've got this corrected in a 2024 manual, because it definitely takes more oil to change when you change a filter than when you don't, and they have it the opposite. And if we look at the supercharged motor, this is on the following page. They got it right for the supercharged motor, because here they have, and this isn't for the non-supercharged triples that are in the AR220. You can see it takes more oil when you change the oil filter than when you don't change the oil filter, which is the way it always is with every vehicle. But anyway, so just something there. I think it's just a mistake in the manual. But long story short, it doesn't really matter. You just have to get your oil level right on the dipstick, and be sure that you screw the dipstick in when you're checking the oil. So in other words, when you insert this dipstick, you're going to screw it all threads all the way down. Take it out, wipe it clean, screw the threads all the way down, pull it back out, and then you'll look at the oil level on there. And with new oil, I found it's really hard to see, just because new oil is hard to see on yellow. But you can do it. It just definitely is a little tricky. I find that with my particular vehicle, I feel like I end up with very close to 4 quarts of oil back in that motor to get it near the full level. So, hope this helps. Changing oil on the Yamaha AR220. And anyway, good luck changing your own oil. You don't need to be scared of doing it, but just take your time. It does take me generally a couple hours, just because I like to be really clean, but I know it's done right. But when I take the boat into the water, I do bring oil, and I do my oil check my first time out on the water. The reason that this, checking the oil is a little tricky with this is it's basically has a dry sump lubrication system, which means it doesn't have a traditional oil pan. So if you check the oil with the dipstick, if you keep adding oil, you'll overfill it. So my suggestion would be to put in oil what you pulled out, and then make sure the engine, you go through the procedure, listen to the manual to recheck the oil. But the engine needs to be ran for quite a while before the oil pump and the oil gets distributed to the proper places where the dipstick is, just for you to get an accurate oil reading. So just a little word on that. It's not like your traditional car where you have a dipstick and you run it, circulate through the filter, then you're good. With this, it has to circulate not only through the filter, but it also has to circulate, through that dry sump system, and get all balanced out before you really know what your oil level is. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little confusing, but long story short, this doesn't have an oil pan, so you need to go through the warm-up procedure that they described in the manual, where you run it for a little bit and then check it.